There it goes.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. All right. So I think I want to say thank you guys for the panelists for coming out and helping out tonight. I know I've been excited about getting a weaponsmithing. We've got a lot of people at least my park that have wanted to learn how to do weapons or have been making weapons and basically winging it as best they can and drooling over some of the work that you guys have posted out on the arts and sciences pages and stuff like that. So I definitely appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to ask our panelists, if you guys are not panelists, while the panelists are giving their who they are and what they do and all that, if you guys can. And we'll start with Drayden. I see you're on the top left of my screen, so I'm going to start with you. If you can go first, who you are and all that.
My name's Drayden Lath. My game name is Vixthara Blacksoul. I've been in the game since 1998. Been crafting in the game for about 7 years or so. I mainly focus on in my craftings mostly on foam smithing. The majority of my foam smithing is plastidip stuff, shields and swords and stuff. However, I really also like to do like themed kind of things, like throwing weapons that look like mugs or something, or acorns, or long sword or short swords in general that look like shovels and stuff like that. That's pretty much me.
And what level owl do you currently hold?
I have an 8th owl.
Thank you. All right. Oz, since you're next on my screen.
Oz the Drunk. What were the questions we got to answer again?
Who are you? Where are you from? How long you been playing?
Okay. I'm Oz the Drunk. I'm from Everliving Woods. I've been playing for 6 years now. I specialize mostly in just normal weapon making, omnibats. I actually enjoy and prefer to try and find ways to make them lighter and still sturdy. But that's my forte is making those. I learned how to make flats a while back, but I'm not exactly proficient with it. But omnibats, I'm very, very good at.
He's good in getting hit with them too.
That's fair.
All right. I'm looking for my other panelists. Where are you?
Tamlin.
There you go. Beefy.
Yeah, Beefy or Tamlin. I'm from Radiant Valley in Knoxville, Tennessee. Originally from Mystic Glade before it fell apart, but it's also been here since about '98. Been making weapons since about '98. So my first ones were awful, but spent a few years belted under and training under Sir Stinkfoot, who got knighted for making weapons. So a lot of my weapons lean towards that kind of design and a lot of that tech that is the very hyperlight tournament level Omni Blade. Recently, in the past couple of years, have really drifted towards trying to take a lot of that light tech and make some fun, goofy weapons, incorporating that same light tech. Don't know anything about plastidip, and super excited about hearing more about that. So,
All right. I think that was it. Yeah, I think. So those are our 3 panelists. And if any of you are not official panelists, but you have experience and all that, I am absolutely open to hearing your feedback, especially those of you who have been in the game a little bit longer. I know some of our newer players that I'm seeing in here. So I'm going to start with the first question, and then after that, as a panelist, if you want to, you can ask the next question, just give the guys an opportunity. So let's see. I've got a bunch of questions here in case you guys run out. So I'm going to start with, what is a good source for getting materials? And I'll leave that up. You guys can decide who wants to answer first.
I'll go first. So for Omni bats, I actually prefer to use what's called Frost King, which is a pipe insulator. I know that there's other versions of it out there, but my personal choice is Frost King because you can get it at Lowe's, and I think they're like $4 a stick, something like that, for like a 6 foot stick, $4 or $5, something like that. And you can basically make two swords and a dagger out of it. And it holds up year after year as long as you take care of it. So as far as the foam goes, I use the Frost King. As far as like my cores that I prefer to use, I use Golf Shaft or carbon fiber, and you can find those at any local. I think Drayden goes to a golfing shop to get his. I go to like eBay and I just order like a bulk lot of them where I get like 24 of them for $50 or something like that. Or you can go to like a thrift store and buy just a regular carbon golf shaft golf club and just cut off the head and then cut it down to whatever size you need. But those are the two primary things that you would need just for making Omni bats in general.
Yeah, I troll Goodwill. My local one has them for like $2 a golf club core. I just keep going back and checking and seeing what they got. I do also agree that that works well for Omni bats. I do like the Frost King foam. When I can get it, it's been about 6 months since I've been able to get Frost King foam. The link has been saying that they're stocked out. So a backup, Optimum Foam Sports has a decent backup for that. It's a little bit more pricey.
So you can actually call like Lowe's corporate and ask them when like that specific store is going to get a shipment, like your nearest Lowe's, and they can tell you when the next shipment's going to come in, if that helps at all.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I'll try that.
I have a place online that I get my place called Zorro.com. I get the same kind of pipe foam. I've never heard of them being out, and you can get it in so many different sizes. In regards to cores, either I get golf clubs. When I get golf clubs, I will scour the thrift stores. I will look anywhere I can, but I found a good place to look is you go to the golf courses, go into their clubhouse and ask the people for broken golf clubs, because the people that break their golf clubs on the course just throw them away. And a lot of times, if you catch them right, you'll walk out of there with a dozen golf clubs for free. When it comes to carbon fiber cores, I go to goodwins.com to get that stuff. You can get them different kinds, different sizes. You can get solid fiber cores there. It's a good supply for carbon fiber and fiberglass cores.
Okay. All right, I will open it up. If you guys have questions, feel free. I'll give you like 3 seconds. If not, I'll ask the next question I have for the panelists.
Well, can I build on things a little bit? Because I mean, we've talked mainly just about Omni blades, and I think we should kind of give a little bit of credit to flat blades. I'd love to know specifically what kind of materials you all have been using for flat blades. I've been using standardly 3 layers, and my base layer that goes pretty much to either side of my core has been like this puzzle mat foam that is usually really popular. I see it. I've been lurking the Plastidip artist page for like a year, trying to pick up tips, but they seem to use it a lot because it shaves down pretty well. But I use that because it's a little denser, and then I sandwich that in between Camp Pad and dap it together. I think that works really well. Like if for no better reason than you have to build up the core of a golf club shaft so that it matches the interior diameter of an Omni blade, especially Frost King, because all that force from just your golf club shaft, weapons break down from the inside out, not the outside in. It's all that force from the inside that breaks it out. If you do cross sections of over and over foam sticks that you've ruined, it's always they spider or splinter from the inside out. But building up that core to match the inner diameter of whatever tubing that you're using to match the core of your weapon that you bought, then that helps. But I don't have to do that with a flat blade. I can cut it to the natural taper of the golf club shaft. And I didn't know if I'd love to hear what Oz and Drayden have to say about that one.
Me personally, when it comes to making flats, I do somewhat similar to what you do, where you take the puzzle foam and you cut out like a square, like a long square of it, and you put your core on the square and cut around it, and then you make sure like you can take a bottle cap off of those cheap like water bottles, put them on there, tape them on real good, and then lay it down. And when you get to the top, you've got that rounded edge right there. It's kind of like the top. And I do the same thing. I sandwich them between two pieces of camp foam. But what I do is I actually put Gorilla Glue in the center there. So when Gorilla Glue starts to dry, it expands. So it expands and glues all the areas, like fits it basically to the core. So that way it will break down over time, yes, but it will help secure and snug it in place, kind of like dapping does when you do it for Omnibats. But
Which kind of, I'm sorry to interrupt, which kind of Gorilla Glue? There's so many. And do you remember exactly which type?
you can just use regular Gorilla Glue. Just
Oh,
regular
okay.
Gorilla Glue that expands. It sounds like it would be very brittle, but it actually, what it does is it fills in all the little gaps and sucks it to the core. So that way it's pretty snug in there. And it will give out over time for sure. But that's what I personally do. And then, of course, when I get my sizes, I know Drayden's not a fan of this, but I actually shave mine. I take a Dremel and shave mine into whatever shape I want it to be, and then I tape it and I heat gun that tape down so that way it's snug and secure when it goes around it.
The puzzle mat is cross-link polyurethane foam. The puzzle mat usually comes in a 4-pound weight. I have a website that I get that stuff from. Where is that? I'm not sure what it is. I'll post it later. That's a good stuff to use for flat blades. What I will do with that is I will make a box around the core with that stuff, and then I will take lengths of the blue camp pad foam and run it around. And but it's strong, so it holds. That foam will hold up really well as a flat blade. As for putting Gorilla Glue in there, I don't know if that's the best idea, because that Gorilla Glue, I've done that before, and it breaks down way faster than you think, and it'll start to move around in there and rattle, and then the pieces will start to eat away at the inside of your foam. A really tight box with DAP to the core seems to work just fine for me. And I mean, you've seen my swords; they're pretty solid. So, but I mean, everybody's got their own thing. But yeah, that's the cross-linked polyurethane foam. You can get that in sheets, or you can buy the puzzle mat. If you're going to make a long sword, it's much easier to get it in a sheet than try to piece together the puzzle mat, because then you got breaks in your core cover, and that's never good.
Yeah, I've actually never bought the puzzle mat. I had some gifted to me. I hear that you can get them at like Harbor Freight or one of those.
You can get them at Walmart.
Yeah, it's the same thing that people use for shields. That gray foam that people skin shields with. It's just shaped as a puzzle mat for weightlifting.
Yeah, the only bad thing about using the puzzle mat is when you get it, it's got that, at least the ones that I get, it's got that pattern on it where it's like a piece. So you have to actually take a Dremel. What I do is Dremel. You could also take like a really fine knife or box cutter or something like that. But you got to cut those pieces off, because you're going to be gluing stuff to either side. So when you want to make sure that you dap it, and when it gets put on, if you don't shave off those pieces will push out, and the DAP won't properly seal down. So if you shave those down, then it helps to create a secure notch for all of the foam going down the blade.
I have found that a pad sander works well for that. Just a little tiny orbital sander.
You work with the tools you got, right?
Yeah, I have a very large craft room, so lots of tools.
That's fair.
Okay.
I've actually been wanting to go through your craft room and just take a look.
Oz, you touched on something for a moment that I wanted to take a moment to point out, that and something that I definitely do, and I think you alluded to that you do as well, is that you do something to build up the tip of the core of the weapon before you put your standard foam around it. I know I usually around the tip I'll basically make a almost a barrel shape thing that builds it up. That is it's just the sticky back craft foam. Enough that there's something really adhering strongly to the core on the tip that's reasonably stout, And then I do lay down that whole core and then trace it out onto the puzzle mat, and that way it sinks into it real well.
Right, that's the same kind of style you do on Omni blades for the tips and stuff for the tapered golf clubs.
Right. Yeah, I do the same kind of for the tip. Yeah, it's stout like that. I actually use a lighter foam for building up the rest of it to fill up the inner diameter, or well, to fill up to get the core of a consistent width so it matches the inner diameter of the Omni blade. I don't have to do that with that is probably my favorite thing about flat blades, is not having to build up the whole length of the core.
Yeah, I know that the Gorilla Glue does have a tendency to break down, which, I mean, Drayden's not wrong on that. It will eventually break down. But I've just found really good success. I've got 3 or 4 of them. My bag is like right there. That I've had really good success with when I make them. But Drayden makes fantastic flat blades. So when it comes to like advice, it'd probably be his flat blade knowledge would probably be much better, especially with what he makes. And I've got many examples I can show.
All right. When it comes to the foam, you guys touched on making just an Omni blade or a flat blade. What about the stuff if you want to do decorative work on the pommel or on the hilt or something like that? You're pointing to Craig on my screen.
I have found that the puzzle mat or the pieces of the crosslink polyurethane, that's what I use from all my shaping of my fancy Plastidip weapons. It's easy to carve, it's stiff, it's durable, and it will hold up to the combat and amp guard. I have seen there are different weights of it, like poundage. So when I build mine, I use a 4-pound. I think, in my opinion, moving to a 6-pound would be a little too hard for amp guard. It's at that point after Plastidip, it's going to be more like plastic than foam. And then again, 2-pound is just too soft. So,
okay.
When you made this, what did you use on the wood portion, like the wood grain?
That's all. Wait a minute, to do the wood grain.
Hold on.
The whole thing's made out of that gray foam. The camp pad. It's all made out of the camp pad.
Right, that's extraordinary.
I mean, not camp pad. The polyurethane foam. The gray
Okay,
stuff.
I was gonna say camp pad. I could not imagine using camp pad on that. But that's awesome.
You don't Plastidip with camp pad. There are some people that will Plastidip over camp pad for shields, but camp pad is always going to have that rough texture that you see on the skin of it. And if you really want to do anything smooth or anything intricate, you can't do that with camp pad.
Yeah, the only time that I've ever tried to make something like custom, like what you made there, was a shield that I made 2 years ago. It had like the Oz symbol and all that on the front,
Right.
but it wasn't anything as intricate as that. But I used crafting foam and camp pad, which is why when you had first said pad, I thought you meant camp pad on that, which is why I was confused, because I tried that.
The puzzle mats.
Yeah, I did not realize that at the time. So the shield itself was already completed, but yeah, next time I go to try to make something custom like that, I'm definitely going to try using that instead.
Okay. You guys out there, the participants that are listening, do you guys have any questions? If not, I'll keep going.
Please give us questions. We're here to teach.
Yeah.
So my next question is, you guys talked about a whole bunch of different foams, and I actually saw somebody that had a weapon that had used a pool noodle, and I know those are no-no. We frown upon those, but they had filled the space between the shaft and the in the hole with Great Stuff foam. Yay or nay for Great Stuff?
What's
Great stuff foam?
Yeah,
Never
it is
heard of
a
it.
spray. It's a spray foam that is used.
The expanding foam.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, that's a
no-no.
hard no.
Yeah.
That
So
stuff
what?
is hard.
Yeah, that's it. So what happens is when you put your core inside of the foam and then you spray it in there, it's going to go in there and it's going to expand and it's going to fill in all them little gaps. But what it's doing is it's getting hard. Subway actually, and Tamlin knows this, Subway actually makes shields with that expanding foam because it gets hard. So the idea is that you're going to be hitting constantly with this foam, and that hard spot's going to be about that, well, maybe not that thick, about that thick, and it's going to constantly, sorry, can't use the other hand, it's going to constantly flatten that foam, and it's going to make it spider web. It's going to basically blow it out pretty quick. Plus, it's also going to peel away at it because when it expands out, it sticks to it. And when you hit, the foam is going to go in and then out. And when it comes back out, it's going to want to pull off it, which is going to rip it, which is going to make it spider web even worse. So I would definitely not recommend that, personally, myself.
I don't believe that's legal, let alone being able to recommend it.
But you can't really see the core. Like,
right, but if somebody said I did this, that's not legal.
Right.
Yeah, not legal, wouldn't work. However, does work for shields, and I don't know if it was Subway who came up with that tech first, or if it was Tier, better known as Lexi, who came up with that tech first. But they've picked that up and run with the building kind of a frame out of foam, and then filling that frame with that expansive, great stuff, and then making a shield out of that. I'm surprised with this.
It's ultra light too.
It really is. And then it's like for your handle, you just set your handle in there and build it, and you just spray it around. And apparently you got to do it in layers to build it up and let it dry.
So Bunch actually took that idea. I don't know whose it was, whether it was Subway's or Lexi's or not, but he took that idea and he made a shield that's in the closet. He made a skeleton for it, like made the body of it, and then sprayed that foam in there in the layers that Tamlin is referring to.
I don't want to say I've seen that.
Filled out, and then he glued other stuff on top of it, so I can't like peel it back and show you. I know it's in there because I wasn't there when he did it, but like he took pictures of it and showed it to me. But it's all filled in like that, and that shield is light and solid. And I know Subway's got a couple shields like that. They're pretty stout, and they're light, and it's one of the best ways to make. Like if you're just trying to fill in foam, it's one of the best ways to do it, in my opinion. I've just never done it, but it's pretty awesome.
They have an issue with cracking, and I don't know if they're getting around that or how they're getting around that. But other than that, I think it's a really neat tech for cheap.
So for shields, yes. For swords, no.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, okay. It actually probably would be a pretty cool idea in the future, Bill, to host this one says weapon making, right? Or weaponsmithing. Making one that says like shield smithing might be a good one too. Getting a few of those people in there, because there's a lot of good artisans in our kingdom that have a lot of how-tos on making really, really good shields with very little supply.
Okay. We can, and that's a good suggestion if and when I get my next reign as regent. And I will look to you to participate. All right, next question actually came from you guys. When I asked you what kind of questions you get asked a lot, and you said a lot of times you get asked what are good materials for pole arms. And I know that there are some people that are out here that want to make them.
When it comes to pole arms, in my opinion, the best materials are either going to be if you can find a really nice, good stick of bamboo that's very light, usually pretty stiff, holds up forever. I mean, I had one for 10, 20 years. And then if you can't get that, band shop poles are good and sturdy, but they're heavy. Anything like carbon fiber or Kaispar that's going to be sturdy enough to hold up to whatever length you want your pole to be you're pretty much stuck with anything really long. So you're at bamboo and you're at band shop poles. PVC doesn't work well because the longer it gets, the floppier it gets, and then it starts to bend. So yeah, I would say bamboo and band shop.
There's okay, so I'm gonna build on that a little bit because I've mained pole arm for 20 years and tried a few different things, and I 100% preach to the choir of bamboo as a pole arm. But that's because of the kind of bamboo that I use, like the kind of bamboo that we found and was sold and was big for about a 10-year stretch. There was Sir Tombo would go and get this bamboo from bamboosupply.net. It would go and show up at their place, and you could pay $100 and pick out 100 pieces of bamboo. He would hand pick them, and it was a particular breed of bamboo called tonk bamboo, and it grows thicker and slower, so it's stronger. Like we have native bamboo here in East Tennessee, and it grows too fast, and it's garbage. I've cut 1,000 of them, and maybe had 5 good core materials out of so many that I've cut, because everything, once it dries, for most native bamboo, it's invasive, it grows too fast, and it dries. So it's very difficult to find, in my opinion, like really good correct breed bamboo. But if you can find it, Drayden's absolutely right. It lasts forever.
It's probably the best core you can get for a pole arm and amp guard.
Now, it has more whip to it than a band shop does. I have a couple of band shop poles. I like them for the sense that they don't have whip to them, but they are just too heavy. I run a speed pole. I can't be like Axgar and or Sir Tarjay, who uses these crushing poles that just brutalizes people. That's not what I really want to put on the field, if I can help it. And there is a lighter version that Patches has, but it was like $100 core.
Yeah.
And it's some kind of carbon fiber material. It is light enough that you could hold it from the pommel at the very edge and hold it straight out with your arm. It really doesn't even feel heavier than just like a 50, like a Min Red. It was
Kitespar?
8. No, it is not Kitespar. It is absolutely some other kind of. I'm gonna have to figure out exactly where he purchased it from. He told me, but I forgot.
That's awesome.
But I could hold it straight out, and it was 8 feet long, and it was ridiculously. Flo wanted to steal it because he could have swung it around like it was a single sword. This was so stupid light, and it has no flex. But I hated it because it had no flex. Bamboo, I've gotten used to 20 years of bamboo, has a little bit of flex. When you go to throw a shot, it goes to move around just a fraction of a second after you throw that shot. And that generates a different fighting style than a polearm that has 0 flex. I could not make the same moves with Justin's super nice, super expensive polearm core that I could make with my cheaper bamboo.
Right.
And
There's
then,
actually-
go ahead.
someone actually just posted a link to something. I wanted to see if I could find where they posted that because I just glanced at it.
Yeah, bamboosupply.net.
Yeah.
That's the one.
I'll be darned. I did not know that you could buy it online. In Alabama, you can just go in your backyard in certain places and just cut it and dry it. That's cool.
You'll cut and dry a lot and pray and hope that it doesn't split on you or be too thin. But
I had a pole that I made, and I just used the stuff from the backyard, and I mean, to this day, it is still holding together. So I mean, we're talking 5 years, because that was one of the first weapons I ever made, and it's still held together pretty well. But if like that stuff you're talking about sounds awesome.
Definitely going with what Tamlin's saying. I have a bamboo polearm that's like almost 10 feet long, and it is the best bamboo out of like the 30 stalks I cut in my early days of amp guard.
yeah, if you get a good one, it'll last. That I think one of the ones that I have is one of the ones that I bought from Sir Tombo well over 15 years ago.
That's awesome. I didn't know you could buy it online, but now I just favorited it on my web browser. So that's awesome.
Well, no, Tombo would go buy their actual shop and give them the money, and then they would let him hand pick out which ones and then he just sell them at events for like $10 a core. So he made for $1 for what he was paying it, and then he had to cart it there, and then $10 a core to sell it. And $10 for a nice bamboo core for a polearm is a freaking steal. And he was still doing like 100% markup. So
Nice. Okay. And then from a polearm perspective, the padding and all that on a polearm is still the same materials that you would use for a short or something like that, correct?
not always, no, because with the bamboo, you're dealing with a larger core material than what you can fit onto a like Frost King. Frost King, I haven't come across it. Maybe you can buy Frost King that has that size inner diameter, but
They have a
it's not
3-inch.
Yeah, but it's when you do
It's
that,
not the
though,
same though.
you don't have here's the thing, and I've seen this before and taken it off the field where someone has a bamboo core that's like an inch thick, inch plus thick, and it's so big that then they put enough foam on it. They're like, oh well, technically it's over, it's 2.5 inches just in some change, so it won't go through the thing. It was like, but there's not enough foam here. you basically have just a skint of foam around a bamboo stick. I think most pole arms need to have significantly larger padding around them. Like I will make my mine won't fit through a 3-inch hole. None of my pole arms will. I build them all larger because I know there's a bigger core there, and I need to generate more foam between that core and the person I'm hitting it.
Well, I mean, beyond that, if you have a 1-inch core, you're supposed to have your pole arm at the end won't be any less than 3 inches minimum anyway.
It shouldn't.
You have to
There's
have
an inch
that.
on either side.
You
as well.
have to have
Legally.
an inch on either side of the core by the rules. So you're going to have no less than 3 inches at the top of a 1-inch core.
You are correct, and I just wanted to make sure that it was underscored and important because
Right.
I have seen too many people try to make something like, well, it'll fit through a 2.5-inch shrink. I was like, no, GTFO, buddy.
That's the main thing you got to remember when you're building any weapon is you make sure that you understand the rule, the way the basic construction rules are. Those are the minimums.
And something that I'll mention is when you make a when you make a pole arm, I love bamboo too. That's one of my favorite ones to use. But when you make one, like Tamlin was saying, it is super important to make sure that it's got enough padding around it to where it doesn't start leaving welts when you start hitting people. But for the love of goodness, make sure that there's enough courtesy foam down there as well, because you've got people that'll make a 2 to 3 foot head and then barely any courtesy foam, and it may be legal because it has to cover 2/3 between the courtesy foam and the hit foam,
It's half now. Like half of the weapon has
Okay.
to be padded.
which is less.
3 feet or half, whatever's less.
Yeah.
That is
So just make sure you put enough courtesy foam on that, because the problem is not so much the head sometimes, because if you've got good people, they know that when I hit somebody with this, it has to be safe, right? So they want to make sure that it's thick enough. But then when it comes to the courtesy foam, they don't think so much about it. But when you've got good experienced blockers, they use the core to block with. So that courtesy padding down there, giving it some leeway, at least creates like knuckle knocking and hitting people with the core and stuff like that, especially when you're taking it to them, can be a big issue. So just make sure you put enough courtesy padding on there and make sure that it's nice, like not some cheap foam. If you're going to put it on there, make sure it's actually nice and snug.
Okay.
One more thing I want to expand on this a little bit. We didn't talk about bubbaing a core. I don't know if you guys have heard that term, where you take like a pole arm, like a band shot pole. I think it's too heavy, it's too long. This is something that Rabbit does and that I've done for a few years. You cut an 8-foot length to like 6 foot, and then you go get the longest golf club you can, and you put it about 8 inches inside the core for the band shot pole, and then build it up so that it doesn't wiggle or wobble in there, which is probably the toughest part. Glue it or tape it down or both, and then your padding goes onto for your strike legal padding, that goes onto the part of the core that is the golf club, graphite golf club, and then your band shot pole has maybe your courtesy padding, and that's sometimes an easier way to build it, and an easier way, sometimes safer too as well, because you generate a flex point and a break point. That's when the pole arm that I'm using that is bamboo, it was originally an 8-foot. It snapped about 10 years ago, and I've been bubbing and putting another graphite golf club in it for years, and it always breaks at the golf club. And
That
therefore,
seems like a safety hazard.
in what way? Like, because
I mean, you don't want to be fighting it and then have that golf club just break off at the end. That could injure someone.
So
It's
Tamlin
broken.
has a good point.
Yeah, it's broken millions of times, or well, not millions, at least 20 times. I've broken that, and it's always encased in the foam, and it always breaks in the same spot right past the end of the pole arm, and it just snaps, and that's it. And you say, well, I'm done with the pole arm today, but I know how to make another one.
Yeah, I actually have heard of that, doing that before. I personally have never done it, but I have seen poles that do that, and I think Tamlin's actually right on that. Because when you hit, if it's all pole, then if you don't pad it properly, when it goes to bend, it doesn't really give a whole lot. But with that head on it, it can actually give to a certain point. If it needs to, it just snaps. to protect the player. And then one thing I was thinking about that we didn't mention either is what do we want to tape the core with, right? I don't know if y'all mentioned it, maybe I missed it, but you want to make sure that you're taking strapping tape with the fiberglass lines in it and stuff, and you want to take and put it all the way down the core. And what that helps prevent is when bamboo snaps, it doesn't just break off, right? It comes out like
Shatters like wood.
yeah. And you want to make sure that that strapping tape is in there, and you want to run it straight up and down, not around it or anything like that. You want straight up and down. Because when it snaps, you want to make sure that that strapping tape is holding it in place so it doesn't snap out and hit somebody or hurt somebody. So I'm sorry if y'all mentioned that, I didn't hear it, but I just want to make sure to point that out. If you're using a bamboo pole, make sure you use strapping tape going from top to bottom to make sure that if it does snap, that it is at least encased in that stuff to hold it in place.
Yeah, it's agreed. It's ugly as sin, but you can cover it with
Oh yeah,
athletic tape. So
oh yeah, like it's like an athletic tape or something like that. Like shouldn't be a problem.
Which brings me to another question. It's a good segue. Duct tape versus packing tape versus fiberglass tape.
Really all depends on what you're using it for.
yeah, that's kind of an E, all of the above.
Yeah.
It just depends on which application.
Packing tape best used for skinning blades. So you take and just run nice smooth layers of tape around your blade. I do it for Omni blades. I don't do it on flat blades. I feel it makes them harder. You don't want to do it tight and then make a nice skin. That skin helps to preserve the durability or the I can't think of the word now. The density of your foam. It keeps it from breaking down as fast. Duct tape. I use duct tape a lot of times to build up the hilt of a sword to like my liking. Some people like the really thin golf club hilts. I like to have a little bit around it so I can get a good grip on it, like an actual sword. I use Gorilla Tape for that because it's got more weight to it and it allows me to kick the balance back to where it should be. Yeah, so I mean I use electrical tape to hold down like my covers on my Omni blades. It's pretty much the only thing I use that for.
I hate electrical tape. It always unpeels on me. Like it's got a great stretch to it and it looks cleaner, but the actual adhesive that's on it is just
You get it
poor.
wet. Just
It really all depends on the tape you buy. I find that's a problem with some electrical tapes. The cheaper the electrical tape, the more likely that's going to happen.
I must have nothing. I'm pretty cheap, so yeah, I probably buy nothing but cheap electrical tape.
Yeah, I try to buy mid-price electrical tape, and I don't have that issue.
So
this is a
no
good
electrical tape from the Dollar Tree.
No. Go to
But-
Lowe's to buy your electrical tape.
But this is a good point having to do with packaging tape. Like if you're going to do packaging tape, I think the lightest duty packaging tape is the best way to do for skinning a blade. If you go and get like the heavy duty Ultra Duck brand tape, it stretches weird, and that's great for a pommel, but it adds weight.
Weight. Yeah.
Yeah, and it deforms weird for when you're skinning the blade. Now, I mean, if you're gonna torque wrap the pommel and try and get like a perfect wedge shape out of it, then you could use it there. But I don't know. I try not to ever buy or use this stuff.
So I've never made a blade with tape like that. I followed some instructions that somebody gave me. We used the real thin stuff when we did it. But what I find just in other crafting is that the heavier packing tape tends to be sharp if it folds. So as it's going over the top of your blade and you do multiple pieces, you're always going to have that little crimped edge, and there's got to be a way to cut that down so that it's not sharp.
yeah, you just take it, and as it goes over, it's going to be, you're going to push down on it and pull the sides up and in, kind of like a letter. And when you go to fold it, you're going to have these little corners that poke out. All you got to do is take a razor blade and go around the edge to cut all that off and make sure that it gets even with the blade.
Gotcha.
If you have something like that in the middle of your blade, their best bet is to try and cut that off and lay another piece of tape. But again, you're not going to use that heavy stuff in because tape is just plastic. And the thicker your plastic is, when you fold it over, like you said, the thicker it's going to be and the stiffer it's going to be and the sharper it's going to be. So you're going to want to use the light, like he was saying, the lighter packing tape for skinning a blade, but you don't want it to be the kind of light packing tape that you can just tear apart like nothing. It's got to have a little bit of durability for it to do its job, because if you put it on a blade and you hit somebody with it and it just tears, that's going to cause even more breakdown. So you want to get like a mid thickness, nothing too thick, but not the thinnest.
Oh yeah, and if you get the really thin stuff and you're trying to torque wrap a pommel, you're going to smack yourself in the face with a pommel.
Right.
Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to mention that I found a tape that I like it's either CVS or Walgreens. It's definitely one of those two pharmacies, and it's called Wexford brand, and they sell it in a 4-pack there. And I think it's kind of the perfect mid-weight for that. Maybe a little on the light side, but I like light tape.
Probably not good to buy it from the dollar store. That stuff's pretty light usually.
No, this is pharmacy. I don't ever do anything. Actually, the stuff that I found at the Dollar Tree was stout.
I was telling them.
Walgreens.
Oh, right.
Sorry,
Did you look it up?
I just looked it up as Walgreens because I'm very much into trying out all different kinds of ideas.
And
it's got a purple label on it with green in it, and it's at least the one that I'm looking at says heavy duty packing tape. Is that right?
No. I specifically looked around for I found the stuff that did not say heavy duty.
Okay, it's got both, but that's just the one that I pulled up.
Yeah, there's a 4-pack of Wexford that you can get. It's the only one that doesn't say heavy duty, and
I think I bought tape there. I'll check that out and see how that works.
Yeah, it's a good idea. And then another thing too, when you're making, let's say it's an Omnibat, and you're running your tape down the blade. If you get to a point where there's a bubble underneath there, because when you're running it down, you want to make sure you're using, lay it down somewhere, use one hand to hold on to the tape and your other hand to gently, I say gently, but you want to make sure that it's snug, smooth all the way down, because if you get a bubble in there, bubble's not doing you any good, right? So what you want to do is if you do get a bubble, just go slow, pull it back up, don't rip the foam at all, and then make sure you try to get it smooth. And each time you go over, make sure you overlap, I'd say about 1/4 of an inch over the other one to make sure that you get a nice smooth all the way around feel, because if you get snags in there or you get like ridges or bubbles or anything like that, what happens is you're going to put a cover on there. So let's say you use like an opaque cover, which is basically just like stocking. You have a little sharp thing in there that you don't realize is in there. It's going to pull through, you're going to hit somebody with it, and you could hurt somebody. The other part too is if you got bubbles in there, when you hit, it's just like a bubble in the bathtub. When you hit it, that bubble's going to, and it's going to push out, and it's going to push that foam away from the tape, which is going to start deteriorating that foam much more quickly, and it's basically going to ruin your blade. So when you do it, make sure that you're running all the tape smooth all the way down, and then when you get to the cap, make sure that what I use is actually something that Bunch taught me. But you use you can use Camp Pad, but use Camp Pad, put a little circle of leather if you have it, and then put another Camp Pad on top of that. You can also use the puzzle foam as well, and what that does, it helps create a tip in there, so that way if your tip goes to push through, that leather helps to stop it and keep it snug. But that's just a little helpful tip.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I want to add one little addendum to that. He got that leather piece from Brennan forever ago. That's a thing that we tried on a few things, and you're right, it absolutely disperses the force. If you're a stabbing tip, disperses across all of the foam that is the stabbing tip. But make sure the leather is cut a little smaller than the diameter of your foam. You don't want the
You can't
leather
have it on the edge.
Yeah,
You can't strike with the leather.
No, so it's got to be significantly smaller. I think probably about a 1/2 inch away if you're going to put that in there, and not the thick leather. It's got to be thin leather.
All right, I want to talk about my tape real quick. I'm going to interject. I use 5 tapes for my Omnis. So I use actually 2 different packaging tapes. One is I use the very thin U-line packaging tape. I actually got it back from Warlord Sports. We're still around. I think it was called Aether tape. I know the exact Uline code, so I can post that later. But it is like it is the thinnest, lightest tape there is. And I use that for skinning. Ace Hardware, they have a really cheap brown packaging tape, and what's great about it is actually it stretches. So when you are the kind of person who torque wraps their blades to their handle, it doesn't break, it doesn't tear, and you can use as much force as you want, and it actually will stretch. So it helps to really secure it onto the blade, onto the handle. And then, of course, strapping tape. I use that for capping the. I use craft foam. I'll compress craft foam for the tip, and I'll strap tape that down. I use double-sided carpet tape. I use that for when I do my stabbing tips. I do 2 layers of foam, a hard and a soft. And instead of dapping those 2 foams together, I use carpet tape, and it doesn't go anywhere. Then I use my Renfrew hockey tape for the cloth tape for my handles, and then for weighing down for counterweights, if I don't have bolts or if I'm using a cord that can't use a bolt, magnetic tape. And that's my that's my spiel.
I think I agree with all of that except for the magnetic tape, and it's not that I disagree with it. I just never used it, but everything else, I'm going to put that on my list. So.
Yeah, I definitely want to try that brown tape because I normally have issues that I try and torque wrap, because I like torque wrapping my pommels down, really like teardrop shaped pommels, because I like holding the blade down as far as I can because I'm 6'6" and I got these orangutan length arms, and it just gives me more length that I can fight with. So I like torque wrapping mine down to basically like teardrop shapes instead of like the V and all that stuff. But yeah, I want to try that brown tape. That sounds like a good thing because I have problems with it breaking.
Have you ever made your pommels using just craft foam by itself?
Yeah, I didn't enjoy it. They got loose, and it just I didn't like that.
Gotcha. Okay, I don't have that problem. As I will pommel fight with mine, and my pommels are pretty secure.
Do you have a specific style when you do it? Because I've never done it before. Like I've never done it where they haven't come loose before.
Yeah, I can share it with you later. I think I have a tutorial. I think I got a PowerPoint somewhere with it.
The teacher gets taught by the crowd.
I'm proud of my Omnis.
I've only made a couple of pommels that were craft foam. I hate to use that much craft foam, and that's one of the reasons that I don't do it.
Yeah, craft foam. At least the ones that I use is like $10 a block.
Craft foam only uses like half a sheet. It doesn't use a full sheet of craft foam. It doesn't take a lot.
Well, maybe the craft foam that I use is a little bit different than what you use. Because mine, I had to use a lot to get it to come out.
Yeah, are you using the sticky back craft foam? Because that's what I'm using, and I got it in little like.
Yeah. Oh, you got the small sheets. No, I got the full like typical like paper size, like 8x11.
Yeah, it's like $10, and you can get, I think it's like 50 or 75 little sheets like that, and they're all different colors. Not that the color matters.
Yeah.
But those are the ones that I use that I've found a lot of success with.
Okay, yeah.
I
got the nice big 8x11 sheets.
No, it's cheaper to go to Walmart and get the big brick. That's the multicolored one. Usually they have it in the school section or near the cards.
Yep, there it is.
My Walmart, it's in the craft section by where they have the sewing stuff and all that.
It was at mine for many years, and then like about 2 years ago they moved it. We were looking around trying to find it, and maybe they're out anymore. And then we went over into the kids to buy stuff for our kids. And we're like, oh, there it is.
So I know that we talked about it earlier, but when it comes to tips, I know that we all have probably different point of views on how to put a tip down. I've seen people use the cap or a penny or something like that, put it on top, and they'll tape it down to where it stays down. I personally don't do that on my Omnibats. I make my Omnibat, the length of the core is 34 inches. The reason being is because I leave enough space up there for the cap to go on, and then some space in there where I can actually stuff foam down in there to pack it in. And then I'm that crazy guy that tapes over it and then puts the cap on and tapes over that to make sure that that foam gets snug in there against the core, because I use craft foam around my core too when it comes to my Omnibats to snug them up to the core itself. So I've got foam, and it's got a little bit extra, probably, I don't know, maybe a little bit, half of a fingernail length over it, that you kind of crimp it a bit, and then you stuff that foam in the tube, probably about that much of it, and it could just be little shreds of pieces. Stuff it in, tape it over, put the cap on, and then tape over that as well.
There are a million different ways to make caps. Some are good, some are right. I don't know that I would do I would be worried that those little bits that you stuff in over time are going to move. What I do is I will take, if I'm using a golf club, which at least for mine, I don't anymore. I like to have that straight 1/2 inch the whole way down. What I will do with that is as I'm building up the taper to make it the 1/2 inch, when I get to the top of that, I will take discs of that craft foam and stack them on top of that already wrapped thickness, tape them down, throw a couple more on there, tape them down. That's something I might use electrical tape for. And then it builds up a good 1/2 inch to however we want of these foam discs. And then I will run that up the blade, cap it off. It keeps them in place, because I've seen in the past with like crappier foam, especially when people were using pool noodle, that like the more you hit with your sword, the more the inside of your tip of the inside tip part of your foam is going to start to splinter and fray away on inside and crack. That's just normal wear and tear over time. And as that happens, the foam that you've stuffed in there is going to move into those cracks and stuff when you start swinging. And then you're going to have that gap there, and your core is going to be much more easily pushed through up into your tip.
Yeah, I'm with Drayden on this one. I used to do a plug that was a plug of whatever kind of moderate dense material, slightly more than like Camp Out or something, and try and stuff that plug in there, and it just didn't work. It felt like no matter what I did, it would shift around or something, and I never liked it. And that's when I started moving. Like I roll on top of itself, I guess, build up craft foam to make a little cylinder of craft foam. Right. That is, maybe that cylinder is about a 1/2 inch tall. Right. And then when that cylinder is built up enough to be the same size of the actual core material for the golf club at the end, then I start wrapping around in about an inch height. So I got about a 1/2 inch of foam cylinder sticking there that's just taped to the end of the core. Right. And then I go around both of those with the craft foam again. So that craft foam, the sticky back, is holding that all in there until I get to that inner diameter that matches the inside of the Frost King. And that I found just does not move.
That's pretty much the exact same thing I do.
Well, when I said I stuff it, I didn't necessarily mean like little pieces. Like I'll take like a strip of something, like basically Frost King, and cut it into pieces that fit pretty snug down in there.
It's not so much that they're small pieces or whatever; it's that they're not secured in there. And when the interior of that core starts to tear and crack on the inside, that piece is going to move around because it's not secure.
Yeah, it's the security of the foam, and I think the density as well. Like I was nervous about using a foam as dense as craft foam on the end until I started using them for my sticks and saw, like, this just works a lot better. After it breaks down, and then I had to take it off and disassemble and cut it in. The tip was still pretty good for the craft foam. It's almost like it was broken in a little bit, and wiggled and moved around some. It squished really good.
Nicely.
What's that?
It compresses really nicely. Like you can wrap craft foam really tight.
Right.
Yeah, and it never really degrades quite like the other stuff does.
Okay. From a Plastidip versus cloth covers, what are the best applications for either one? What are the benefits of Plastidip for a weapon over just a traditional cloth cover?
All weapons have to have cloth on them. The strike portion of the weapon has to be like a cloth.
You can't Plastidip that.
Right. It all has to be cloth. Like, it doesn't have to all be cloth. Let me go back. The strike legal portion of that weapon has to be covered in cloth. So it has to be cloth one way or another. Now, whether you decide to make so if you make an Omnibat and you make a tube Then you basically slide your sword in and it's all cloth. Or you make a flat, which Drayden did that with the Oz sword that he made, which I can grab and show because I like showing off. But you can plasti dip it, but no part of the strike portion cannot be covered with cloth. So as far as plasti dipping goes, it's more for show than actual striking portions. So I'm going to go grab the sword while you guys talk.
So I'm going to ask a question, a follow up on that. And it's, so if I have a flat and I'm using the strike legal, is that the edges on both sides? Or is, like, if you look at it, think of it from a knife perspective, like a cutting knife. There's the sharp edge and there's the blunt edge.
He's gonna get his thing, and yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's many different kinds of swords. There are double-edged swords, and well, I mean, there's a couple different sides. There's double-edged swords and your single-edged swords. If your sword is a double-edged sword, both sides have to be cleared and plasti dipped. However, if it's a flat, your flats can have plasti dip on them. The flat sides up to a ½ inch away from the striking edge. Did you grab that sword, Oz? You want to hold the blade up for me? So if you see at the back of his blade where there's this plasti dip up here, that side of the blade is not strike legal. So if you can plasti dip all down that side up to 6 inches from the tip, because 6.5 inches, because the tips the stab you have to have 6 inches for stab legal weapons that are not plasti dipped. But yeah, if you have a single edged blade, you can plasti dip almost that entire blade.
Yeah, so basically you just have to leave, like, I should have turned this push to talk on. You basically have to leave, like, I can feel it on this one, about this much worth of the strike legal portion going down. So all of this on the other side can be plasti dip, but this itself from right about here, so is that about an inch, Drayden?
It's the rules say a ½ inch from the strike edge.
Yeah, so all of this has to be cloth and foam. But this can just be plasti dipped and all of that, which is exactly what he did, but he did a shorter version of what we're explaining. So he could have gone all the way down the blade to right around the turn right there.
No. You have to leave the 6 inches bare on the top because your anything stab legal has to have that 6 inches of clearance.
Okay.
You can only go down to about 6.5, 7 inches from the tip of the blade.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you had done that down that whole edge, that's legal on the field.
Yes.
If you hit somebody, it's still foam, and it's not a hard foam. It's still that soft enough foam that it's not going to injure somebody.
Yeah, it's that 4-pound gray the foam that the camp pad or the puzzle mat is. But again, it's a soft enough foam where if I do hit somebody with it, it's not going to injure them at all.
And the blade that it's sitting on still has to have that 1 inch on either side of the core to be legal anyway before you have that plasti dip over that.
Yes. This particular sword that he's showing is a little bit wider than that, mostly because I had it pre-made before he asked for it for something else. But yes, you have to have that inch on either side of your core at any rate.
Okay. All right.
Well, ½ inch on the non-striking.
Well, yeah,
Right.
If you're making a single-edged sword, you can move your core anywhere as long as your strike legal edge has that inch around the core.
Okay. All right. I have any questions from the gallery thus far? Or if not, I'll keep going.
I got a quick one. So I'm assuming there you put the cover on first, then you do the foam, then you sprayed the foam with the plasti dip, right?
Yes.
How do you prevent the cloth getting covered with plasti dip when you...
Simple painter's tape.
Okay, something as simple as that. I figured.
Yep. It's just simply you make it butt it up against that foam as best you can. And if it's a thinner painter's tape, use 2 layers. I got this nice thick painter's tape from Lowe's last time I went, and 1 layer does just fine.
All right. If you are doing a weapon, what are some pitfalls to avoid while you're making a weapon?
PVC.
Yeah, don't use PVC unless you absolutely have to. Typically, it's for weapons that you have to like bend the blade, like I made like the hook sword, or if you're making cross members or you want a thicker handle. Typically, you're not going to use a whole length of PVC because it's an inferior material. It's heavy, it bends, it can break, and when it does break, it like breaks like points like a knife, and you don't want that. Perfection. If you're making a sword, don't perfection will mess you up every single time, especially if you're working on plastidip stuff. Nothing is ever perfect. No one should ever expect it to be.
Yeah.
I think one of the things for me is PVC is god awful. It's PVC when making weapons is the same thing as glitter is for making crafting stuff. It's awful. Don't use it, and it's terrible. The other thing is when you're making a weapon, like I know we talk about fiberglass cores and stuff like that, but you can go to like Lowe's or something like that, and those little things that you put out in your yard that are like orange and they've got the white lines on them, whatever, don't use those either. I know we talk about fiberglass. We don't mean like fiberglass like that, because those are heavy, and when they bend, they whip, and they smack pretty hard. So really and truly, I've had people in the past get confused when we say carbon fiber, like a golf club. They get confused and think that we meant fiberglass. So they'll go out and get those orange things, tape a bunch of them together, and now they've got themselves a perfectly great little cord that's going to hurt somebody. So those are two things for me, just right off the top, that I would personally not use.
That's 90s tech.
Are those illegal to use, those orange yardsticks?
No, they're not illegal. They're just frowned upon.
Okay.
There is a better quality of those that you can get that's still the 3/8-inch fiberglass cores. They're at Tractor Supply Co. They're electric fence posts. I actually have some with me, and I hold them. Do a side-by-side comparison. Almost no whip. They are great. I can't wait to make a flat blade with it.
I mean, if you can find one like that, then I mean,
It's if you have Tractor Supply Co. It's worth picking up. I'll post a link.
Awesome. All right. If I was I want to become like Drayden. I know it's going to take me, 50 years to get there,
nobody can
but
be like me.
what are good tools for foam carving for a beginner? Like, what are must-haves and what are things to avoid? You don't need to spend the money on that because you can use this from the house.
Well, if you're going to be like Drayden, you want to make sure you have pointy fingernails. That's a first. And then the other one is you have to have that special looking goatee that he always has. That's how you start off looking like Drayden. Yeah, like that.
Pointy fingernails, yo.
Oh, did you trim them? They used to be pointy.
Don't knock the fingernails, yo. They come in a lot of helpful situations in my crafting. The little places where you have to tuck things or pry little things out. You'd be amazed. All right.
Right.
So when it comes to things you must have if you're going to be foam smithing with plastidip and making nice little things, I have a short list. You need to have a Dremel. Dremels are great. They're going to do a lot of your carving and shaping is going to be done with a Dremel. A wood burner is a good thing to have if you have, and a couple different size tips for it. They will help you do things like wood grain and just a little holes, things you got to make. You're going to need an X-Acto knife, and more important than the X-Acto knife, you're going to need a knife sharpener, because foam, especially the foam we use for plastidipping stuff, is just tears up a knife blade to nobody's business. And you're going to be sharpening it all the time, just about after every cut, if you want to make good cuts. And you're going to need a heat gun. Heat guns help you smooth out edges because when you cut the foam, especially if you're cutting it with anything automated, some people use saws and stuff to cut the foam, or when you want to use a Dremel to sand down an edge, you're going to want to use that heat gun to help you melt down that foam to help it make it easier to sand and get smoother edges. One piece of Dremel equipment I found invaluable is this little bit here. This is a sanding stone. There are several different kinds of these. This one is an orange color. It is the best thing that I found on a Dremel to use for smoothing out foam. It's very fine. When it spins, it generates a lot of heat, and it just works well for smoothing out rough areas. They come in a bunch of different sizes. However, they come in a bunch of different colors too. If you get the other colors, there's pink ones and there's green ones. They're not so great. They will rough up your surfaces more than smooth it out. So the orange ones are the important ones.
Okay.
And then beyond that, you need your basic things like a ruler, tape measure, things like that.
Hey,
Are
Drayden, can I
ahead.
piggyback on that? Is there any way we could get you to maybe drop a link to like maybe your 3 favorite YouTube videos on basic how-tos for starting out?
To be honest, I have never willingly watched a YouTube video for anything. I learned most of what I've learned from the Plastidip artist page. Anything you need there, I'm self-taught. I haven't had anybody teach me. I don't go to YouTube to look for things. I do trial and error, and if I do have questions, I go to the Plastidip artist page, and they are so helpful there. They will answer anything. You can find videos there if you need them. So yeah.
I personally, when I first started making weapons, was 6 years ago. It was at the very first Kingdom event I went to. It's actually where I met a bunch. But that was the very first Kingdom event I went to, and I actually, much like Tamlin, although Tamlin got the better part of it, I actually learned how to make swords from Stinky. He was hosting now he wasn't hosting the class, but someone was hosting the class for him using his style. And they basically gave out paperwork. So I actually have paperwork in like my AmpGuard toolkit that I refer to from time to time that actually gives you dimensions, the order that you do stuff in, and stuff like that. So that may be something that maybe we can like upload, or maybe Stinkfoot actually has like a copy of that somewhere that he can, just upload, because that was the first person that ever taught me how to make swords. Because when I first made my sword, I was that guy that went out and bought those fiberglass rods and taped them together because I'm stupid. And you don't know any better. And then you go to a Kingdom level event, they've got these cool looking golf shafts, and you walk away with this really cool looking sword and some paperwork telling you how to make more. And that for me was invaluable. So when it came to like doing stuff, I tried watching videos and stuff like that, but I found that the paperwork that he gave us was way more informative and so much better than actually like watching a YouTube video and stuff like that. It's just me personally, though.
I mean, the best way to learn how to build is to build. Watching YouTube video is never good unless you're actually going to do it step by step. You're never going to learn anything anyway. Hands-on experience is the best, I feel. That's why I like to do the classes.
Okay. What is for you guys, what has been the hardest thing, or the hardest weapon you've had to make to date?
Okay, so I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to realize that Tamlin already did it multiple times, but it is an axe. I have struggled with making axes. I want to use axes so badly, but I just simply cannot make good ones. Any ones that I make, I can't seem to get the blade to stop turning around the core, and maybe that's just a defect that I'm not doing properly. But me personally would love to be able to make axes, but I went to Radiant Valley the other day on the tour, and I saw that he had 2 of them right there, and he handed one to me, and there was just an instant part of me that was just jealous. It was like, I'm just going to go put this in my car real quick, don't mind me, and then I'm going to take it home and cut it in half. I'm going to see what you do with it. But that to me is one of my biggest things, is I've never been able to make an axe. That's why I don't have any, is because I just have not been able to do it. It's just my bane.
Okay, so full disclosure on the axes, the half axe, the woods cutter axe is just one side. I didn't make that. That was left over from Bunch of stuff. Bunch had an incomplete product, and it was just the axe head of foam on a PVC core. And I'm pretty sure he used drilled through the PVC and put posts that came through it to keep it from spinning around. I think that's the only way that you could. That's what I would do if it had been PVC. But I had to cut it down from 4 feet to 3 feet, and it still has a little bit of width, and it's ridiculously heavy. But it looks cool, and it's big, goofy weapon, fun, cool.
We have a 2-headed axe.
Yeah, the 2-headed axe I did do. That was my own.
That's the one that I want to know how to make, because, like, contrary to popular belief, I actually like dwarven races. even though I'm 6'6" and they're like 4 feet tall, so there's obviously a difference there. But I like dwarven races when I play like D&D and stuff like that. So I've always wanted to be able to just go out there with like a sword and an axe, because typically dwarves use axes and hammers. But I've just never been able to make one, and that's what I want to know is how to make one.
Oh, I built that one off of it's actually a pro graphite badminton racket because they're longer than tennis rackets.
Oh, is that the one? I think I asked you about it, and I thought you said that you use like a tennis racket or something like that with it.
Yeah, it's not. I think it's technically a badminton racket, but I was at Goodwill and they had one there. And I was like, man, I wish they had made these. And it was like I picked one up. I was like, wait a minute, and
They
looked
have
it on the side.
longer
It said on it,
They have longer
graphite.
necks and rounder heads.
They do, yeah. And I was like, that's so perfectly shaped. And I picked it up and it said, carbon fiber along the side of it. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah, that's right. You did say that because that was when I was telling you that I wanted to make like a bardic short sword that was shaped like a tennis racket. There was a lute. So when you're on the field, you're not fighting anybody. You can act like you're playing it, and then someone runs up on you. You can actually hit them with it.
There's a ridiculously dope lute on the Plastidip.
I saw it.
Artist
I want
made.
it.
You've seen it? Yes. God, it's so beautiful.
I want it bad.
Drade, I think hardest weapon. I'm sorry, I derailed us. Drade and go.
I don't really find weapon making very hard. I think the most intricate thing that I'm working on is I'm making my wife a Madu. That's the shield part is a butterfly. It's all going to be plaster dipped and whatnot. It's taking a lot of time and I'm having to get a lot of things for it. But I mean, I don't really. I can make anything. I don't really find them difficult. Sometimes somebody, if has a commission, they'll give me something that might be a little odd. But I mean, I always find a way. I don't really find it difficult. It's a hobby of mine. That's why I do it. It's easy.
Cool. And
That's why I
Tamlin?
pay him to do it.
And Tamlin, how about you?
I'd say refining what I consider the perfect polearm core for what I use took me the longest. But that's because I had really crappy tech at the beginning.
Well, it's funny actually that we're talking about this. I actually have. Do you remember that band hammer that Bunch had?
Yes, I do.
I've got that hammer, and I actually need to go back and rechange some stuff on it. But I was actually curious. I don't know if you know this or not. How he made the inside of it, like the hammer, connect to the core? Because I haven't gotten to that point yet, but it's loose, and I'm gonna have to repair that too. I think I got it over
Probably
here.
just glue.
Yeah, so this is it. You probably recognize it, Beefy, but this is it. But the core is loose from the actual head.
That seems like it's probably just glued on at the top. Maybe with some tape.
Probably. I didn't know if Beefy knew what Bunchies had done to it or not.
Nah, man, I don't.
But yeah, I'm gonna remake this too. I think it's pretty cool.
I want to make
Alright.
a mallet that looks like a tenderizer, like a the tenderizing meat mallet. I would even want it to have the little points, but I don't know how to do that in a way that's safe. Like maybe cut some egg crate and put it on each end to make it look like it's little points. It'd have to be something really soft like that. I cannot figure out how to get a cover over
So we
something
did
like
back
egg
in the
crate
90s.
and keep the points.
Egg crate foam was like the best thing for aesthetics in the 90s.
Oh, it looks so cool. But how do you get cloth to stick over the egg crate?
You use
And-
nylons.
But it compresses the egg crate in a way that looks gross to me.
Yeah, it's rough. Egg crate's so soft, it's hard to really get anything to mold to it.
I think I'm going to have to hand stitch a bunch of little small diamonds onto a thing.
I might do it. Little like foam, like cotton filled diamonds.
Yes,
That'd be legal.
100% that. I
That'd
think
be
that would
legal.
probably be my answer. Would be that the thing that I haven't been able to make yet is a Morning Star mace that has neat little diamond studs on it that would still be legal. They'd have to have that, like that egg crate foam that just completely compresses when it hits somebody, so that it
What you do is you take whatever cover you're going to use. Clearly, it's not going to be nylon, and you do like you were saying, sew some little diamond shapes on there and stuff those with cotton, just loose cotton. Sew them closed. There's your studs.
I wouldn't do cotton. I think even cotton would be too stiff. I think I'd rather it be something like that egg crepe foam
Depends how
that
much
really,
cotton you
really
put there.
compresses. But I think it's going to be an enormous pain in the ass to stitch the cover. Like the cover will be the hardest part of the weapon.
Oh,
Yeah,
it
so-
will be.
Be a nifty idea. See if it works.
I'll let you know.
All right. On the flip side, what has been your favorite project to date?
I got a tie. I have the sun and moon shield that I made. That's I've posted that. If anybody hasn't seen it, it's on the Arts and Sciences page somewhere. And then I made a flame blade a while back that was not only did it look cool, but while I was building it, I caught it on fire. So it's literally a flame blade.
I have seen both, and they are both beautiful. And that's one thing I know this. We're not talking about shields tonight, but one of the things that I love about your work is that when you flip the shields over, your shields are finished on both sides. It's not just the front, and I think that's really cool.
I am incapable of making a shield that I haven't finished the back on. I can't bring myself to do it. If you're gonna do one side, do the other side, because you're already doing one side and the edges. So might as well do the back.
Gotcha. Tamlin, what's your favorite?
I don't know. It might be that big mallet sword that we had at the park. It's pretty recent. I don't know that I have a picture of it.
Is that the black one with the blade that's really light, like the great weapon?
Yeah. It's not great weapon. It's about a 40, I'd say, in full length. It doesn't quite reach great weapon length. It's essentially if you had a flat blade and you stuffed a Tempur-Pedic neck pillow that happened to be mallet shaped over it, and then hand stitched it close. I think I'll drop a picture. I got a picture. I'll drop it in the
Best use for a My Pillow.
yeah.
All right, Oz, how about you? What's your favorite so far to date?
My favorite so far to date, I actually gave that away. I was trying a new design for the pommel, and I actually cut a gamma ball in half and used that on the bottom, which took away from some length on the tip for sure. But it was still 36 inches. It was almost right at the max point. But I wrapped that handle so tightly around it that it was literally a teardrop shape, and I loved it so much. But we had a new player with some young children that were playing, and they stayed for a while, but then they ended up the kids lost interest, so they just didn't come back. And I gave the daughter that sword thinking it would help, hey, I've got a really cool looking sword that's awesome. I can get on the field and do cool stuff now. So I was trying to hopefully help promote her to be able to play, but it lasted maybe 6 months and then they were gone, maybe a year. But that was probably my favorite. My second favorite would probably be my Oz shield because it was such a flop. When I used
We'll rebuild it.
Oh, I used Through the Roof. To this day, it is still not dry. What I did is instead of using mineral spirits, I used mineral oil.
Oof.
Oh no!
Oh.
And because I'm stupid, I did not think about the difference when I was buying them. Like, I'm sure they were right next to each other, and I saw mineral. Yeah, that's right. I just grabbed it real quick and brought it home, and I mixed it in the proper stuff and put it all. I lathered it on there.
Well, the best thing to use, to cut to cut that stuff is you do it with Plastidip and the Through the Roof kind of stuff is naphtha. It's kind of like a mineral spirits kind of thing, but it's the way, I guess, the chemical makeup of it. It breaks down a little bit easier than when you're using mineral spirits.
Well, so it was fun because it was the shield that I learned how to Plastidip with, and I know shields aren't part of this conversation, but it was the one that I learned how to Plastidip, how to custom make stuff, how to use a Dremel to edge, and how to sculpt stuff, and it flaked off basically. The plastic dip that I put on there and the paint that I put on there, it was silver. It came off after a while because I didn't do it because I obviously was a novice at it. But then I did it again, and it was like the castle from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It just fell back into the swamp. So I built another one, right? So I basically put layer on layer on layer, and it came off too. So that's when I finally used Through the Roof. And when I used Through the Roof, I put the mineral oil in there instead of mineral spirits, and
You were using Plastidip to seal it, like that clear Plastidip?
No.
Oh,
No, I was using Plastidip on the edges and stuff like that. But yeah, that was probably my favorite one because it was such a blunder. It was actually just a great learning experience to be able to have. And they always say you have the most fun in your failure sometimes, and that was my biggest failure, was that shield, because it's in my closet right now, and I'm almost sure that I could press down on it and still feel the moisture on my fingertips because it's still not dry, and it's been 2 years.
Oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
it's gooey.
It sweats. All right. From an overall weapon care, I've heard don't leave them in the car. Don't in the summer. Don't leave them in the car in the winter. Don't put them on their tips. Don't put them on the pommel. Lay them flat. What's a good way to keep your weapons so that they last long term and don't break down easily?
I mean, first you want to make sure they're built well. That'll definitely help keep the breaking down from happening. You don't want to like you were saying, you don't want to throw them in your car, in your trunk or something, and where a bunch of stuff's going to get thrown onto. You're going to start getting indents and tears and holes in your foam. I've never had a problem leaving regular Omni blade. I've never really had an issue with that. However, Plastidip weapons, you don't want to leave them in the heat because they get hot. Sometimes bad things will happen to them. The colors might bleach out. Sometimes, if you're not using the right sealer, you'll get like a yellowy tinge above them from the sun. But again, in the cold, as long as it's nice and safe, the cold's not going to bother your Plastidip very much. Just take care of them. I keep mine in one of those folding lawn chair bags. I keep mine pommel down in those and just set them in a corner of my house.
So me personally, I hold like a pretty stupid philosophy. Treat your swords like you would treat your phone. You want to keep it out of the water. You don't want to drop it. You don't want to leave it in your car. You don't want to leave it in your car in any condition of weather. You want to bring them in, and if you think about your pocket like that bag, you always want to keep them in your pocket. So treat your swords like you're going to treat your phone. Sorry, picture my wife, but yeah, treat them just like that, because if you take care of them like you take care of your phone, because your phone's what, $800 to $1,000. If you take care of your swords like you take care of your phone, then they will last. So if you don't go and play with them in the water, obviously if you make them correctly, you have sealed them fairly well. But water will still seep in there if you weren't careful, or if you're using them constantly in the rain, because you're hitting it. That tape is going in. Water can just seep in. So treat it like you would treat your cell phone. That's I know it sounds stupid, but when you think about it, it really makes sense. You just want to take care of them. You want to take care of your cell phone. You want to take care of your swords. All your weapons.
And your pocketbook. Because, I mean, eventually, if you're not taking care of your swords and you have to rebuild them once a month or something because you're not taking care of them, that starts to add up. Even, I mean, my Omnis cost about $7 to make. And, I mean, that adds up over time.
Yeah, I mean, perfect example is this one here. This is one that Drayden made. He doesn't like it. I absolutely love it. It is fantastic. But if I were to leave this in the car, I don't know how this Plastidip would last very long. I think it would probably
UV protectant.
I think it would probably melt a little bit with this Alabama heat. But that's the thing is it's a very nice weapon. It's made very great. It costs me decent amount of money. And if I basically left that in the car, it'd basically be like me leaving $100 bill out there on the street for the kids to walk by and pick up. It's just throwing money and nothing, basically. So treat it like a phone.
Literally, the only reason I would leave my gear in the car while coming back from the park or somewhere is if it's raining so bad out that I don't want my gear to get soaked while bringing it inside. That's it. Otherwise, and I'm with you all on every point for that.
So I kind of want to comment on something that Oz, your Plastidip's not going to melt in the car. Even in this heat, I keep one of my shields in my car all the time. It's just fine. Sometimes, if it's a lower grade foam, like a lower poundage, your foam can get a little mushy in the heat, but your Plastidip's not going to melt off your weapon.
I more meant like milk gets sticky. I didn't mean like
No, that's
melt
not
off
gonna-
of it like that.
I've never picked up a Plastidip weapon, at least one that I've made I've never picked up one in the heat that has been sticky. If you pick up a Plastidip weapon, even if it's been sitting in the heat for 8 hours and it's sticky, they did something wrong when they made it.
Well, I just more mean like, so where I park at work, let's say I were to accidentally leave that sword in my car. The car is in a parking lot, which is
Right.
basically a mini oven when it's 100 degrees outside. So it's constantly being heated. That was my example is if I leave them in there,
Right, and
we have parked bi-weekly. So if I leave them in there for 2 weeks and I don't take it out, then the heat can constantly make it like sticky and all that. That was my fear.
Right. That's the heat is not going to be good for your sword, but it's not going to be good for your sword not because the Plastidip's going to get stickier, but the foam underneath it is going to get heat up and get soft. And if you were to leave it in there in like 110 degree heat or something for like 12 hours or something, you might get some of the thinner pieces of foam start to warp or something because of the heat. But that's not going to be something that's going to be common. It's going to take some extreme heat to do that.
Yeah, I've heard it's more not so much the foam, but the tape, because that tape, that especially the not so good packing tape, tends to melt and separate. So now you've got the glue is stuck to the foam, and the tape is just kind of floating out there. So
That can happen. However, Plastidip weapons, at least the ones I make, don't have tape.
gotcha. All right. What's a good handle cover material?
Like when you
Okay.
grip it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I've heard like grip tape from tennis rackets or hockey sticks. I know that I've used some cloth tape and it ends up getting my hands get sticky.
Yeah, I try to stray away from any kind of tape for my hilt because of the stickiness aspect of it. All tape eventually will start to get sticky with the heat, especially with the heat down here and you're sweating your hands. On my swords that I sell people in my merchant booth, I will use paracord. For my personal weapons, I use a thin leather wrap. He's showing you for the Oz sword I made. I used a leather. I have a couple sheets of this brown suede leather that's soft on one side and really hard on the other. Like not hard, but like smooth on the other. Both of these weapons have them. One's got the shiny side, one's got the soft side. But that's for the fancy weapons. My Omni blades just have some of that thin leather lacing that you can get at Michael's or something. And that's what I prefer.
All right.
Me personally, I use athletic tape. I buy it off Amazon, and I'll buy like packs of 3 or whatever for $6, and I'll just get them in all varying colors. And then as far as that goes, like I've never had any issues with any of this. I mean, it does come loose after a while for sure, like Drayden was talking about, but really and truly, I wear gloves when I fight, so the gloves really are the things that are getting sticky and all of that, so I don't really even notice it. But I actually just prefer grip tape. That's my big.
All right. And then I have one last question.
Well,
And
wait,
that
which one do you
is-
use, Tammy? I'm curious.
I primarily used grip tape or athletic tape for the longest time. Most recently, I've been my favorite thing that I found is there's a cheap hemp twine you can get in a giant ball at Walmart, and I'm cord wrapping that. It's not as thick as paracord, and paracord I feel gets slick in someone who doesn't wear gloves. It gets I can get a little. I don't like the feel of it in a bare hand. But the hemp, after you sweat on it some, that it's been tightly wound, it actually just kind of, it still gives a really good grip, and it smooths it just a little bit. I really enjoyed that. I've only done it on like 2 swords ever, but I really have liked the effect.
I've used something similar to that once or twice. It's not a main thing that I use.
Looks really nice too.
All righty. Go ahead, Drayden. You were going to say something.
I when I use it on the top of something like the shovel thing that I made. So like I would wrap that around like the handle at the end of the shovel that there would be. It kind of gives it the more like twine looking things kind of gives it more of like a downgraded peasant kind of look. If you're doing it on something like that. So I like things like that for an aesthetic purpose, not so much for their grip.
Right. So the last question I have is about ANS. What I know Oz is looking at me. What are things when you're going to submit to ANS? There is a write-up that has to go with it, and obviously you want your item to be field legal if it's field legal. If not, you want to state that it's for court only. What are some things that you should and should not include in a write-up for ANS?
Well, I mean, the most important thing to put in a write-up for ANS when you're building a weapon, especially if it's not just your basic Omni Blade, is any new techniques that you've learned while building it. This shows that you're not only just building a sword, but you're actually invested into learning how to build a better sword, and that will always score you points in an ANS.
I've never entered any of my weapons into an ANS before, so I've only entered the shield one time. So other than that, I've never entered weapons into an ANS. So I'm learning that as well.
Chicken.
That's
Oh,
exactly
sorry.
it.
They asked what we were having for dinner.
Oh, I thought so. Oh, no.
I also have never entered a weapon in ANS. I don't intend to either.
Oh.
Wait, hold on, Beefy. So these weapons that I saw when I was at RV that I told you that I just wanted to put in my car, you haven't entered those into anything?
No, I've never.
What owl are you at?
8th.
Wow. Huh.
So,
You should.
Owls
so
aren't just weapon making.
contrary to popular belief, you do not have to enter an ANS tournament in order to get your higher level ladder awards.
This is true.
Oh, I know, but what I mean is what I saw when I was there. I saw him having maces that had detachable heads that when you swing them, the head comes off like a heavy throwy.
The Gears of War. The Gears of War. I forgot about that. I really do enjoy that one too. That is fun.
So it's basically a sword, right? A regular Omnibat sword, and it's got a circular foam around it that's got edges on it and stuff like that. Completely legal, but it slips over the blade of the Omni, and when he takes it and swings it, he can whip it. And I watched him do it several times. He had Boop in the chest with one, but he whips it, and the head comes off like a heavy throwy, and it'd be perfect for monks. Like, you go out there with a couple of those, start slinging them and stuff. It's awesome, and that's what I mean. Because if you have an idea like that, I don't know if that was your idea or if it was somebody else's, but
that was 100% me. I was proud of that one.
That's what I mean. That if you were to put that into a contest, not for awards, because you don't have to do it for the awards, but more to showcase a creative idea. And just me personally, like, the more people that enter into stuff into ANSs like that, where it's a creative idea that's functional and awesome, it to me, it promotes other players to follow suit and not copy that idea, obviously, but to come up with another idea that's cool as well. Because if it's all just regular swords and stuff like that, then nothing's ever brand new. It's just a cool looking sword. But yours is a functionally cool looking sword that has a very sweet attribute to it, and that's what I meant. If we can get more people doing that, then we can get creative juices for people to make out of the ordinary sort of stuff.
And I will tell you that the judges would love to test that out.
That one happens to randomly be in the picture that I posted in the crafters list when I was trying to say that the hammer in that picture is my favorite one. But the one to the furthest right, that's a brown stick with a gray gear looking head on it. That gear is the part that can it is a throw. It can be slid off and thrown.
Right, but you got to warn people about things like that too. I mean, it's great to have creative things, but like in the case of his mace here, you can't throw a throwing weapon with a sword. He has to take it off and throw it with his hands for it to count. You have to wield it in order for it to be a legal throwing weapon. You can't use a sword to throw a throwing dagger at somebody.
Is that in the rulebook?
I'm pretty sure it says in order for a throwing weapon to be wielded, it must be held in the hand.
We're going to find out.
Hey, champion, get on it. You have other stuff to look up for me too. All right. So I know that we've got a bunch of people in here. One, I want to remind you guys to make sure that you go in and you do your sign in so that we can get our PM to give you your attendance credit for the night. So your name, your park. If you're not from Winter's Edge, make sure you put your kingdom and what class you want for tonight. And then I want to open up the floor. Are there anybody out there that I did not ask a question that you wanted answered? You missed something, even if we already talked about it. The guys are here. We've got about 20 minutes left. So if you guys have questions, go ahead.
A question for Drayden.
Yes.
What is the secret for sewing covers for flat blades?
Get a sewing machine.
Got it. Practice.
Yeah, well, so what I do with my flat blades is I will take the material and I'll fold it over and I'll take pins, and on one side I'll pin it so it's tight to whatever shape the blade is, and then I'll pull that off, take it to the sewing machine, sew it up, and then I'll put it back on the blade and look for any spots where it needs to be sewn down more, like there's any little nipples or anything poking off. You pin those back down, take it back to the sewing machine, sew it right up. You can get any shape you want like that.
Okay, I can kind of visualize that. Yeah, I've become like an expert when it comes to sewing omnis. Like my
Well,
thing's skin tight.
I have a wife that's really good with her sewing machine, so
All right, I'll give that a try. And when you design shapes to your flat blades, I haven't seen much of your work, but like when it comes to the actual shapes themselves, do you use any kind of software or templates? You draw them up, or how does that process work for you?
mostly what I'll do is I will draw up on a piece of paper what I want my blade to look like, and then I pretty much freehand it after that. I'll take my sheet of my foam, draw out my dimensions, my 2 feet or whatever by my 2.5 inches, and then just freehand and cut it out.
Okay.
And if I need to, I will use my Dremel and my X-Actos to give it the more of the shape that it needs.
Got it.
Sorry, I was just reading the rule book on projectiles just to make sure.
Look under what wielded is.
I'd still take it off and throw it. It'd still be fun as hell. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a cool idea. Just like you can't hit somebody with something that's not actually
I think
wielded.
the only time wielded is actually used in the rules of play is when we're talking about gripping a shield.
Are we all actively looking for it?
Nah, I'm not.
I'm actually generally interested in this now.
If you can't find the answer, put it on the that's why we have the rules discussion page. But
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely do that. Sorry, I got engrossed in that. I was like, oh, I gotta know because I love the idea of that sword.
I read that page religiously daily. I try to.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Teflon turned me onto that one a long time ago. I was like, hey, what do you do to keep all this interactions for the rulebook in your head? He was like, I haven't read the rulebook in a while. I mostly just look at the rules clarification page here.
Yeah, once you get the rule book, read that once or twice, get your basics in there. Any questions that come up, and the couple questions keep coming up, every so many months because we get all these new people that don't know what their, the rules are, or how the interactions and stuff are. So they're always asking.
Well, that's the one thing we look forward to in V9 is they'll reword a lot of things because there's stuff that you can't wield but you can still carry. So say you have a heat weapon done on you, you can still hold it in your hand. You can carry it. You don't have to drop it.
Oh, you actually? I'm pretty sure you do have to drop it. You can't.
No, you do not. You do not have to drop it. You just can't wield it.
If you have a wounded arm, you do not have to drop your sword. You can take it and tuck it behind you or whatever. You don't have to drop it. Honestly, I don't see the rule that states that. I'm looking at wielded and all of that. I'm going to post that on there to double check, but I don't see anything preventing it, honestly.
I'm pretty sure it might be coming down to those things
think
like
the issue-
read call.
The issue here is that it runs along the same lines as the Atlatl, which has been deemed blatantly illegal. And the idea is they don't want that extra force behind a throwing weapon.
The what?
The Atlatl, it's a thing where you get like you would in the case of an Atlatl, it would be either an arrow or a javelin, and it's like an ancient weapon that You like notch the projectile in and then throw it. It's kind of like a sling, but all wood.
Imagine a soup ladle with a really long handle.
It's like
Right.
It's what's that called? CrossFit? No, what's that called?
Lacrosse.
Lacrosse. It's just like
Yeah.
lacrosse.
Yeah.
So
And that's, I think that's completely valid.
Okay,
what they're
here
talking
you go.
about
Here
for
you go.
those, but they were throwing
Almost-
stuff that's like 2.5 inch across, and you know,
right.
when you get something that's larger and lighter foam, then it's like if something like that gets thrown, or I don't know, even shot out of a catapult, then I'm going to be not as worried about it hitting somebody.
Projectiles may be thrown. Only projectiles may be thrown.
In the case of a javelin, I mean, there's a difference in amp guard between projectiles and throwing weapons. Most projectiles are limited to arrows and ballista bolts, things like that, things that are fired from something, crossbow bolts. And your throwing weapons are your throwing weapons, small, light, or small.
Throwing weapons are considered projectiles. They're
Yeah,
listed underneath.
Are they? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm confusing that with ammunition. My bad.
Ammunition is listed separately
Right,
from projectiles.
And ammunition is so you can throw just about any projectile that's not ammunition.
Right, and I think in this case, this conversation has turned into a rules conversation. So,
That's it. Stop the recording. We're done.
right, I'm gonna post that question up just to find out, because we don't need to keep going into that. Sorry, Belle, about the tangent.
That's okay. It happens to me at least once a day. Today, it didn't. So now, my day is complete. Thank you very much.
Well, and that's the thing, is when you live amp guard, like a lot of us have a very large portion of our lives being amp guard. So when something comes up where it's like a rules call or something like that, it just sparks the interest to find the answer.
You got to know,
right?
I've got the ROP up from my question earlier today, so I get you.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's open on my craft table.
Yeah, I much prefer modern technology PDF version because you can do a Control F and find.
That's exactly what I did. I just looked up the word wielded, and I found that you have to, all thrown weapons have to be thrown, but it doesn't say how you grip them and throw them. That's all I've found so far.
Well, thrown is very different from being launched.
See, I would be, and I know that you're going to ask, but from my perspective, I don't fight.
You don't?
I have twice in my amp guard career, and they've both been in the last 6 months. But in ammunition, it actually says not explicitly granted to anybody. Ammunition is a class of projectiles used in conjunction with other types of weapons. So to me, that would fall into ammunition almost.
Right. Ammunition refers to anything that's fired and not thrown with your hand, not manually thrown. So in this case, this mace head would, if you're using the sword to throw it, it would classify as ammunition, not a throwing weapon, because you're not actually wielding it like a throwing weapon.
I think I could see the slippery slope argument for it as well, though, and I could see the concerning side of it. I think ultimately it would be something that if somebody even tried to recreate what I've made and brought it out to the field, they're gonna want to run it by their reeve. They're gonna want to run it by their champion.
I mean, anything that is out of the basic ordinary stuff, you always want to run by your reeves and champions and stuff.
Yeah, and that's like, I brought it out to the field. I was like, "Hey, I think this is neat." And Teflon and a bunch of people were like, "That's so much fun. Let me borrow it."
And that being said, it is a still really cool weapon. You can still use it. I mean, that's awesome.
Right. And in addition to that, if the reeves and champion or whatever on the field deem it to be safe and legal, they can allow you to use it.
Oh yeah, like I personally saw that one and I tried it. I can't use it like Beefy can, but I did see it, and it does not. I don't know if there's any way to whip that thing hard enough to actually hurt somebody.
I'm not suggesting that throwing it like that would hurt somebody or anything. What I'm saying is that by throwing it with the weapon, you're making it not a throwing weapon. It's becoming ammunition, and you're not. You can't do that with a sword.
Absolutely, 100% agree.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm definitely suggesting that there's a slippery slope for safety for it that we'd have to.
Oh yeah, I mean, once
Yeah,
you
no
start
doubt.
having a whole bunch of that stuff, the argument for the atlatl comes back up and so forth. And
Yeah, we don't want that.
Slingshot. I want a
the
slingshot.
atlatl should never be allowed. That is a horribly dangerous. There's so much force behind that.
Yeah.
Now, if you could somehow rule it as a siege weapon, you might be able to get away with it because that's siege weapons. They're not very cut and dry. So
No, they're not. I've built a siege weapon before. Me and a couple buddies built a working catapult.
Avi actually has Soft Kitty and Warm Kitty. Soft Kitty, Warm Kitty. Yeah, so he has 2 catapults that he uses from time to time when he brings them to. He's brought them to our park before. He's brought them to Kingdom events, and they actually work really well. And then at Symposium for the last 2 or 3 years, he's actually hosted classes on how to build them. And they actually build one, and I think that the people that pay for it can build it, and then somebody takes it home. I don't know how that process works, but they basically build one on site, and then somebody takes it home.
Right. I've seen that in a couple different kingdoms.
I want to see a battering ram.
I've seen them.
Trebuchet.
That's what we built was a trebuchet, not a catapult.
I think one of Avi's last ANS entries before Pandemic hit was also trebuchet. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was.
Siege weapons are fun. When we built it, it was back when they had to be big and 4 people had to wield them, and we put it on top of a minivan and drove it to Kentucky.
Oh my god.
It was fun.
All right. Any other questions, guys?
I do. I have one.
Okay.
It just kind of popped in my head earlier when in my park group chat we were talking about what our dream weapons were, and I had mentioned Hades' Bident is one of the ones I wanted to make. Though in my head, an Omni Bident looks a little weird. Is it legal and possible to make a flat-bladed spear?
A flat-bladed spear? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just follow the same rules you do as a flat blade sword. If you need to make your box bigger, because clearly your core is going to be bigger because it's a spear and you're going to use either band shop or bamboo or something like that, all you got to do is just up the dimensions of the foam you're using. That's all.
All right. Because I couldn't find anything that said anything about flat-bladed long weapons like spears and things like that. So I thought I'd come in handy.
I have
talking
one
about
that
a
I have
glaive?
half built.
She is basically talking about a glaive, yeah.
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, a glaive's more like one blade, though. She's talking about something it's kind of like a trident, but it doesn't have a center prong coming out the middle. As far as if I'm understanding it correctly, it's basically a 2-pronged great weapon. I'm assuming you're talking like Clash of the Titans, Hades spear is what you're talking about, like his staff spear.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's basically what it is, like a 2-pronged great weapon instead of like a glaive is 1, whereas this one's like a 2. Or I guess
Also
like
in Japanese known as a sasumata, which is what I want to make so bad.
Right. So
Sasumata.
when you're talking about pronged weapons in Amtgard are a very touchy subject because everybody wants to make them and they're almost never legal. The problem with them is the idea that you can catch somebody's arm in there, and if there's a twist, it could break something. If you were to make something like that, making it more in like a Y-shaped pattern as opposed to like parallel
Narrow,
blades,
yeah. Sasumata, look it up.
would be much better plan because anything that's going to have parallel blades, especially the closer they are, if it can catch an arm or catch around somebody's neck, it's not going to be legal.
Oh yeah, so Sasumato is literally exactly what you're talking about, like a Y. That's a good call.
Right.
And I've actually talked to a bunch of the guys from our park that want to do these really tapered shaped blades that are real thin, and what I've told them is you have to stay legal. It's going to be bulky for you to stay legal and do that shape that you want. So maybe you consider doing a negative space kind of thing so that it dips in a little bit and use black or something like that in that negative space to still make your shape. It doesn't seem to go over so hot though.
So,
Y'all got me interested now.
so I have in my craft room right now a Band Shop Naginata style polearm. It's got the blades, however long the blade has to be. One side is straight, flat, curved. It comes up the back, and then the back has your bump ridges. It's kind of like a serration. The blade itself is about 3 inches thick because it's on a Band Shop pole, but it's still a flat blade and has that shape to it. The only thing you really need to do to get that shape is when you're making your core box for your foam, take some extra pieces of foam and glue on like the bumps or the different little shapes that you want, and then you can take your foam that you're going to run around the edge for striking, and it'll come out with whatever shape you're looking for.
What a coincidence! I also have a flat blade Naginata.
Yeah, mine's going to be all plastic dipped and fancy. I have a nice scene in it, so I've been working on it forever. I don't think I've ever built a flat blade spear without doing plastic dip on it. I think the most of the times they're just Omni speed poles.
I don't know. I think that this idea is actually really cool now that I'm looking online. Although it does not take much for me to squirrel something.
Y blade.
Yeah,
Nope, definitely not.
awesome. Yeah.
So even with if you were to make the Y blade, you could do something like a serration on the inside with making like little bumps out of foam before you do your lining, so it's got character to it, not just a flat, popsicle stick looking blade.
I got you. Yeah.
And you don't have to plastic dip that, so.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
I really want to make a Gladius length, I think it's like 32 inches, sword in a crisp snake-shaped blade. The only thing I could think of is basically make it, like you're saying, serrations bumpy on the outside to where the minimum or the inside of the serration would be 2.5.
Yeah. So what you would do in that situation, I think, is pretty much the same thing. You just would alternate your serrations, and then once you have those on, take your Dremel and give those in betweens a little bit of curve so it has that crisp wave to it. And then remember, your tip, you get a little bit of leeway with the width of your tip because you have that 1.5 inches to stick through that ring. So you can do a little bit of tapering on that tip to make it look more crisp-like.
Okay.
Just be careful with those serrations because if they're not a certain width, they can be failed or disqualified.
Yeah, make them I mean, as long as they also are not going to fit through that 2.5-inch ring, they should be okay on the blade because you're going to make the wavy blade, but your end result is going to be a wavy blade that's going to be pretty much the same distance the whole way down, and your waves are going to be such if you're making this right, your waves are going to be at such a distance between each other. It's going to be plenty wide enough to be legal. You're not going to have to worry about them even going into a ring.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried to make a crisp blade once for I was making a fizz rep for the phase blade. And I was going to have like the moon phases in it. Never got to finish that.
Nice.
Well, guys, thank
All
you
right.
so much for the class. I'm out of here.
Yep.
All right.
So it is 9:00, and I want to thank all of you panelists and all the participants for coming out. Oz, I do love your suggestion for another panel on shield making, and I know we've got some people that wanted to participate as panelists tonight that couldn't, so maybe they'll participate in that one with you guys. I will be posting that one probably right after coronation. Make sure I actually get the role before I don't want to put the cart before the horse per se. So I'm very excited about this. Thank you so much for participating, and Geralder, if you can help us turn off Craig.
I'd like to leave with one last tip.
Sure.
When you're making weapons, especially specialty weapons, make sure always to double, triple, even quadruple check your measurements. specifically on any kind of cross member protrusions in your pommels and stuff like that. The last thing you want is to make this really nice, pretty weapon